All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Nike's business model.
Sounds good.
And I got to say, even just glancing at their latest reports, their 10Ks for 2023 and 2024, plus the Q1 2025 10Q, there's some pretty fascinating stuff in here. Like, did you know that over half of Nike sales actually happen outside the US?
Yeah, it's true. It really shows how they've shifted, from just an American brand to this global powerhouse. I mean, they've got factories and distributors all over the world. They even have this whole system for dealing with currency changes with those factories.
It's amazing how they manage all that. But before we get too deep into the global supply chain, maybe let's just take a step back for a second. When you hear the name Nike, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For me, it's those classic sneakers, the swoosh, that whole image of like athletic excellence.
Yeah, footwear is definitely at the heart of their brand, but when you look at their revenue, apparel actually makes up a pretty big chunk of their business too. And they even have an equipment category.
So it's more than just shoes, huh? Makes me wonder, how do they get all this gear into the hands of customers?
Well, they have two main channels, wholesale and what they call Nike Direct. Wholesale is pretty straightforward. They work with tons of retailers around the world, your sporting goods stores, department stores, even smaller shops.
Right, cast a wide net to reach everyone.
Exactly. But what's really interesting is their focus on this Nike Direct side. This is where they're putting a lot of effort for future growth. It includes their own retail stores, both physical and online, trying to create a more personalized experience, really control how their brand is presented.
Yeah, it seems like this direct approach is becoming more and more common these days. But here's something I found interesting in their 10K. In 2024, their three biggest customers outside the US accounted for something like 15% of their international sales. Doesn't that seem a little risky, relying so heavily on just a few big players?
Yeah, there are definitely risks that come with having a concentrated customer base like that. If one of those relationships goes south, it could really impact their bottom line. But on the flip side, it also gives Nike a lot of leverage when they're negotiating with those key customers.
So it's a bit of a high-stakes game. Okay, so we've got a decent sense of where the money's coming from. Now let's flip a coin and talk about costs. Their reports mention manufacturing, marketing, and technology as major drivers there.
You're right, those are the big three. Manufacturing is definitely a big expense, especially since they rely so much on contract manufacturers, mostly located outside the US. And with that comes a bunch of inherent risks, supply chain disruptions, changes in labor costs, even just the prices of raw materials fluctuating.
Yeah, we've all seen how fragile those global supply chains can be. Any little hiccup can have huge ripple effects.
Yeah.
What about marketing? I mean, Nike is known for those huge ad campaigns, the celebrity endorsements. That can't be cheap.
Oh, absolutely not. Marketing is a massive part of their brand building strategy, and it comes with a price tag. Those big endorsements, the creative campaigns, all of that adds up. The competition for top athletes is fierce, and it's been driving those endorsement costs up in recent years. Nike even specifically mentions rising endorsement costs as a risk factor in their reports.
It's like an arms race for the biggest names in sports.
Yeah,
And then there's technology. Nike's always pushing the boundaries. Innovations like their air and Flyknit technologies, that research and development has got to be a huge investment.
Oh, absolutely. Nike puts a ton of resources into staying ahead of the curve, developing those new technologies, creating those engaging digital experiences. It's all part of their commitment to innovation. They even recently launched a whole new ERP system. I'm sure that wasn't cheap.
Wow. Makes you wonder what they're cooking up next. So we've talked about the cool tech, but what about the why behind choosing Nike? What makes people choose them over all the other athletic brands out there?
That's where their customer value proposition comes in. It's really a combination of things: performance, innovation, that iconic brand image, and even a deeper emotional connection they've built up over the years.
Okay, break that down a bit more for me.
Well, performance is obviously key, right? People trust Nike to deliver. Their stuff is built to last, designed for athletes of all levels. Then you have that constant innovation we were just talking about, always pushing the boundaries with new technologies and designs. And of course, the brand image itself is incredibly powerful. It represents success, athleticism, a certain style. And all of that feeds into this emotional connection they have with their customers. It's not just about buying a product, it's about belonging to something bigger.
It's like buying into a whole lifestyle, a community.
Exactly. And that focus on community ties into their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is something they highlight in their reports. They're not just focused on selling stuff, they're trying to make a positive impact.
It's a good reminder that businesses can be a force for good. But of course, they also need to make a profit to survive. So With all these factors at play, how does Nike differentiate itself in such a competitive market?
Well, there are a few key things. First, there's that brand power. That swoosh is instantly recognizable anywhere in the world. It carries decades of reputation and trust. Then there's their commitment to product innovation, consistently bringing new technologies to market. And their marketing is undeniably effective. Those campaigns, the endorsements, they really know how to connect with their audience. And we can't forget their increasing focus on that direct-to-consumer approach. They're really pushing Nike Direct and have even stopped reporting their wholesale equivalent revenue.
That's a bold move.
Yeah.
But to pull that off, they need to be operating really smoothly behind the scenes. What would you say are their most critical operational activities, the things that keep everything running?
I think there are a few that stand out. Product design and development is obviously crucial, creating those innovative, high-performance products that people want. They even have this really collaborative design process, using market research to figure out how to use new technologies. Then you have supply chain management, managing that global network of factories and distributors, making sure materials and finished goods are flowing smoothly. It's incredibly complex, especially with all the disruptions we've seen lately. And finally, there's marketing and brand building. Maintaining that strong brand image, engaging with customers, staying relevant in a constantly changing world.
And like a well-oiled machine with all these different parts working together. All right, that's a wrap on part one of our deep dive into Nike's business model. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still more to explore.
In part two, we'll really dig into the numbers and analyze their financial performance in detail. We'll see how all of this translates into profits and assess their overall financial health.
So stick around, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back. Ready to dig into these financials?
Oh, absolutely. In part one, we talked about Nike's revenue streams, their costs, their overall value proposition. Now, let's actually look at the numbers, their financial performance. We've got their 10K reports for 2023 and 2024. Gives us a good snapshot of how they've been doing.
Perfect. So, big picture first. How did Nike do in terms of revenue growth in 2024?
Well, their total revenue hit $13.6 billion dollars in 2024.
Okay, and how does that compare to 2023? Big jump.
It was a slight increase from 2023, which saw $13.4 billion, dollars, so about a 1% year-over-year increase.
Not huge, but considering how competitive the athletic apparel market is, any growth is a good sign.
Right. It's a tough industry. But those are just the overall numbers. Let's break it down a bit. Look at their different segments. Where do they see the most growth?
Well, footwear, their bread and butter, brought in $5.5 billion in 2024, up 2% from the previous year.
So the sneakerheads are keeping them going strong. What about apparel?
Apparel actually saw a more impressive jump, hitting $1.8 billion. That's a 10% increase compared to 2023.
Wow. So their efforts to move beyond just shoes are paying off.
It seems so, yeah. And remember how we talked about their direct-to-consumer strategy? That's a key driver, especially in those international markets.
Makes sense, cutting out the middleman, more control over pricing, the customer experience. But revenue is only one side of the story. Let's talk profitability. What do their earnings before interest and taxes look like, their EBIT?
Right. EBIT gives us a good look at how efficiently they're running their core operations. In 2024, their EBIT came in at $3.3 billion.
Okay, interesting. And how does that compare to the previous year?
Actually, it's down a bit. In 2023, their EBIT was $3.5 billion, so a decline of about 4% year over year.
A decline in profitability always raises some questions. What factors contributed to that?
Well, those rising costs we talked about earlier, especially in marketing and manufacturing, those definitely played a role. And, their investments in technology and that direct-to-consumer infrastructure, those are impacting the bottom line in the short term.
So short-term pain for long-term gain.
Exactly. You can see that throughout their reports. They're making strategic decisions focused on future growth, even if it means a little dip in profits right now.
It takes some guts to prioritize the long game like that, especially when investors often want to see immediate returns.
I agree, but Nike has a history of adapting, innovating. It's not surprising they're taking this approach.
So we've looked at revenue, EBIT. What other key metrics should we be looking at, to assess their financial health?
Gross margin is a big one. It tells us how much profit they're making on each product. After taking out the direct costs of production, higher gross margin means more money in their pockets for every item sold.
Right, makes sense. So how's Nike doing there?
Pretty well, actually. Their gross margin in 2024 was 46.1%, up from 44.3% in 2023.
That's a decent jump. Does that mean they're getting better at managing those production costs? Or maybe raising prices?
Probably a bit of both. They've been working on optimizing their supply chain, which helps control costs. But they're also really smart about their pricing. They've built a premium brand, and they're sticking with that.
Yeah, they definitely charge a premium. It's part of their image. Any other metrics worth looking at?
Another important one is return on invested capital, or ROIC.
Hmm.
Basically, how well are they using their capital to make money? How efficiently are they turning investments into profit?
Right. The higher the ROIC, the better. Where does Nike stand?
Nike has always had a very strong ROIC. It shows they're good at allocating capital wisely and driving that profitable growth.
So, taking all this into account, how would you sum up their overall financial performance in 2024? Are they in a strong position?
I'd say overall, yes. Like many global companies, they're facing challenges: inflation, supply chain issues, tough competition. But they're navigating those challenges strategically, continuing to invest in their future while still delivering solid
That's a
results.
balancing act for sure.
Exactly. And that's why they're still a dominant force in the industry.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Nike's business model. We've covered their financials, their strategies, but now I kind of want to zoom out, look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, the context is always important. What's going on in the industry that could impact even a company as big as Nike, right?
Exactly. So, what are the major trends shaping the world of athletic apparel and footwear right now? What's keeping those Nike execs up at night?
Well, one big one is what we call athleisure. It's not just about performance anymore, it's about style, comfort. People are wearing athletic clothes everywhere these days. That line between workout gear and everyday wear has gotten really blurry.
Yeah, for sure. I practically live in yoga pants. But I guess that casualization, it creates opportunities and challenges for a company like Nike.
Absolutely. On the one hand, their market gets bigger. People are buying athletic apparel for all sorts of reasons, not just hitting the gym. But then there's also more competition. Everyone from high-end fashion brands to those fast fashion retailers wants a piece of that athleisure market.
So it's not just the usual suspects like Adidas and Under Armour.
Right. And speaking of competition, another trend is those direct-to-consumer brands popping up. Those online companies are really shaking things up. They build these loyal followings online, offer a more personal experience, and they can often react to trends much faster than those traditional companies.
Yeah, it's a whole different ballgame. So how is Nike responding to all of this? Are they just sitting back and letting these new companies take over?
Oh, not at all. In fact, you could say they're embracing some of these trends, like their focus on Nike Direct. That's a direct response to the growth of e-commerce and that desire for more personalized experiences.
So they're learning from these new companies, adapting.
They are. They're using their brand's strength and global reach to create a seamless experience for customers, both online and in their stores.
So meeting those challenges head on. But beyond just competition, there's another big factor impacting the industry: sustainability. Consumers are demanding eco-conscious products, transparent supply chains.
It's not just about looking good, it's about feeling good about what you wear and its impact.
Exactly. People want to support brands that share their values. So how's Nike handling this push for sustainability?
They're taking it pretty seriously, investing in sustainable materials, reducing their environmental impact, promoting ethical manufacturing. It's complicated, but they're making an effort.
It seems like they get it. Sustainability isn't just a fad, it's a real shift in what consumers expect.
Exactly. Companies that ignore that are taking a big risk. Especially with younger generations, they're holding brands accountable.
So looking ahead, what do you think the future holds for athletic apparel and footwear?
Hmm. Well, I think we'll keep seeing those lines blur between athletic wear and everyday clothes. And technology will play an even bigger role. Things like smart fabrics, personalized fitness, maybe even virtual reality.
Virtual reality workout, that's wild.
I know, it sounds futuristic, but it's getting closer. And of course, sustainability will remain a big focus. Brands will have to keep innovating, creating more responsible products.
So it's an exciting time, lots of challenges and opportunities.
It is. Companies like Nike, the ones that can adapt, innovate, and stay true to their values, those are the ones that will thrive.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Nike's business model. We looked at their financials, their strategies, and the bigger trends affecting the industry.
We saw how they're navigating this changing market, embracing new things, while still holding on to what's made them so successful.
Hopefully this gave you a better understanding of what makes Nike tick.
And as always, we encourage you to check out the source material. There's tons of info there. We've only scratched the surface.
That's the best part of a deep dive. It makes you want to learn more. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.